You may have missed me last week. It's because I did something very stupid followed by something smart. First, I trusted a company that deserved no such trust, and then I started paying them a lot more money just so I could get customer service. And there are two important lessons in this story. The first is that customer service matters, and yes, it matters more under some circumstances than others, but if you buy a service that might require customer service and opt to go cheap as a trade-off for there being none, you are making a mistake. The second lesson is about drinking your own Kool-Aid. We recommend and sell services that can seem to be replicated for a whole bunch less than it costs to buy them from us. But the competing services generally don't include customer service, and great customer service is worth paying for. And aside, the customer service problem I experienced this week was so bad that we're renaming the Answer Guy's customer service Wall of Shame. Previously named for Verizon Wireless, today we rechristen the Answer Guy's one-in-one internet customer service Wall of Shame. Strap in. On June 4th, we started seeing large performance issues at Answer Guy Central. Some of our other sites were slowing down too, including PCVIP and Video Network 1. The affected sites had two things in common. They all run on WordPress, and they were all hosted at one-in-one internet on a shared server. Shared server means two things. There are multiple websites running on one computer, and multiple companies hosting their websites on it. Shared servers are what makes getting your website online inexpensively possible. The opposite of shared servers are websites like Google, which are so busy and used by so many people that one website needs to be hosted across an array of many web servers. And there are many options in between, but generally those are thought of as either virtual servers or dedicated servers. With a virtual server, that's VPS, you still have multiple businesses hosting their websites on one computer. But each business gets a guaranteed slice of that computer's power, meaning that only as many VPS setups as the computer has room for are possible. On a dedicated server, one company leases a computer and only their website or sites live there. Why don't you just buy a computer, throw it in a closet, and hook it directly to the internet? Well, some businesses still do, and once upon a time everybody did. But it's much easier to trust the nuts and bolts of hosting to someone else, almost always less expensive and way less likely to result in catastrophe if something goes wrong. Unless, when something goes wrong at your server host, you can't get customer service. Until you introduce customer service to the equation, there are basically two variables that determine what level of hosting muscle you need: cost and an understanding of how much power is enough to suit your needs. In the early days of Answer Guy Central, I tried several hosting companies. We landed at and have stayed with one-in-one internet since 2004. Back in the day, shared hosting provided more than enough oomph to handle our needs, and the truth is, it still does. Answer Guy Central pulls about 1,000 daily visitors, and while the overall load on our combined website portfolio is close to 50,000 page views each day, the way computers and the internet work, living in a well-run shared environment, that volume isn't even close to a problem. Now, here's the server load on our one-in-one shared server. And what you're looking at is only a 3-minute snapshot, but I watched the performance of our sites like a hawk, and so I can tell you that with the exception of a period lasting a few weeks about a year ago, our shared hosting server at one-in-one always runs in the 3% load range. How many websites are hosted on that server? Round number 400. And you can check what other websites live on your server using this tool. Sounds odd that a big company in the hosting business would set up a shared asset in a way that uses only 3% of its power, but there's more to it than that. Just assume that with 400 websites hosted in one place, there are a lot of things that can go wrong. But since Answer Guy Central at 1,000 daily visitors is actually more popular than all but the top 1% of all websites, assume also that most of the 400 other websites have far less traffic and so use far less power than we do. On June 12, one-in-one set us up a dedicated server and we began moving our sites to it. And that job is almost complete. Here's the CPU load on the new dedicated server we're now leasing from one-in-one internet. You see what that says? It's less than 1%. So now we have our own server for which we pay many times more than what we paid for a one-in-one shared hosting package. And we're underusing its ability dramatically, which sounds like a terrible idea, doesn't it? Well, it's not. With a dedicated server from 101, we also get dedicated support from actual server experts who answer the phone when you call in. In other words, I bought way more server than we need so I could get customer service. And that's what this story is actually about. Customer service and technical support at 1&1 Internet's shared hosting division basically don't exist. Well, actually, this story isn't about 1&1's lack of customer service, so much as it's about lesson number 2 from above. You need to drink your own Kool-Aid. As someone who sells services with values determined by what we provide our customers, I don't get to blame anyone else for having gotten what I paid for. I have a solid rationalization in that I don't need more server capabilities than shared hosting at 1&1 provides, but I completely whiffed on the fact that I could get better service, and that was what I was buying by upping for more server power. I like to say that 1&1 never told me this, and literally they didn't. But over the years, when I've contacted 1&1 customer service with problems large or small, I've been told one thing pretty consistently: we suggest you upgrade your service plan. What never occurred to me as 1&1's answer to their service underperforming both its capabilities and in some case basic merchantability was that the message wasn't, as I'd always heard it, if our services aren't good enough for you, then you should buy more services, so much as our higher cost services aren't about higher need, so much as they include enough customer service to make them worth buying. Bringing us to this week and the reason we've named the Answer Guy's 1&1 Internet Customer Service Wall of Shame. I noticed the problem on 1&1 shared hosting on June 4th. Between then and June 6th, I did every kind of diagnostic I could think of before contacting 1&1 and letting them know there was an issue. It took some effort to get to a person who understood enough about how servers work to get an acknowledgement that the problem was in fact in 1&1's shared server, not a matter of something going wrong either on our side of things or inside WordPress. The obvious fix at that point was quite simple and something that pretty much everyone has heard when dealing with a technology company. Reboot the computer. Well, because 1&1/United Internet is a huge company, reboot the computer is not simple. And because there were those other 400 websites running on our server, it's fair to say that simply rebooting is not necessarily fair, even though it was clearly correct. I was told that a referral up the support food chain had been created and all we could do was wait. And I waited until the evening of June 8 when I arrived home from a dinner at which I'd been offered an investment in Video Network One. Knowing that I was likely to be researched in the aftermath of that offer, I decided that I couldn't wait any longer for 1&1, whose customer service shortcomings had spilled over into technical support failure. I called 1&1 Sales and I placed an order for a dedicated server. I was told that installing the server would take, quote, between 0 and 4 days. And that's a huge range, of course, but remember that I was placing the sales call on a Sunday night when I had no reasonable expectation of immediate assistance. I crossed my fingers that I'd wake up on Monday morning with a working server. Nothing on Monday, nothing on Tuesday. Wednesday came and I called to inquire as to status, and I was told that things were held up because 1&1 didn't have the correct hardware in stock, and I was asked to wait until Thursday. And I opened a ticket with 1&1's executive support team, pleading for help of any kind. On Thursday, June 12th, I called 1&1 dedicated server support department and was told that the hardware still wasn't in stock, but that if I was willing to upgrade to an even more powerful, more expensive server, they were available and they should be live and ready to be worked with in 4 to 8 hours. Yes, please. And exactly 4 hours later, I had a live server, and 73 minutes after that, my 1&1 dedicated support person had transferred all the files from our shared 1&1 server to the new server. We weren't in business, but we were in a position to start getting there. Well, do you see the breakdown? 1&1 shared hosting support may be atrocious, but they're paid to be atrocious, and it seems do upsell to more expensive servers in lieu of providing customer service. I had no real reason to be confident in the attentiveness to detail of the 1&1 sales guy working a weekend night shift. I'm a little surprised that the 1&1 salesperson who told me about the server hardware availability issue on Wednesday didn't have the foresight to try and do the second server upgrade right then, but maybe 1&1 sales doesn't have access to availability, and maybe, just as 1&1 shared server support isn't informed enough to provide out-of-the-ordinary assistance, 1&1 sales is kept in the dark about provisioning issues and could only read the progress update on my account. And one-on-one's so-called executive support team, they responded to my plea for help Wednesday morning on Friday afternoon. No part of one-on-one customer service worked until I reached a server person who took it upon himself, remember, this isn't his job, to actually provide support and see it through. Several one-on-one support people at different levels simply didn't care enough about support to provide support to a customer who's been with them for 10 years. And 2 salespeople dropped the customer service ball too, or didn't have access to the information they needed because one-on-one, steeped in a culture of not providing customer service, hadn't made it available to them. In many ways, the correct and simple way to handle one-on-one's customer service failure would have been to leave them altogether. But remember that United Internet One-on-One is the largest company of its kind in the world. Leaving them sometimes makes sense, and One-on-One has screwed up a few other things. But there's pretty much no way to beat 5 hours and 13 minutes to do what the one-on-one dedicated server support person did for me. Now you, on the other hand, are probably not in the same position as one-on-one United Internet. Until you achieve the ubiquity of Influency, if you screw anything up the way one-on-one screwed up for me, your customers will leave you. Getting your marketing and customer service built to where you need them and aligned is what we do here, so contact me if you'd like to explore how that works. But whether we ever do business together or not, please take a bit of free advice. Lesson 1, remember? Customer service matters. It matters when you're the customer, and it matters to your customers. And customer service, whichever side of that you fall on, is worth paying for. I'm the answer guy, and we're back. And I'll be back.